The morning my stepfather's lawyer called my name in that boardroom, I remember thinking how strange it was that my hands weren't shaking. Everyone else in the room expected them to. My stepfather's sister, the one who'd been CC'd on every email, who'd shown up at every family meeting with that tight little smile. She was watching my hands specifically. I noticed. I noticed everything. I had been noticing everything for 7 months. Let me back up. My dad died in February. Not suddenly, it was a long illness, the kind that gives you time to say goodbye but not enough time to actually process what's coming. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. I flew home to Kelowna the week he was admitted to hospice and I didn't leave. I slept in the chair beside his bed most nights. I held his hand when he couldn't talk anymore. I was there when he took his last breath at 4:17 in the morning on a Tuesday, while the snow came down outside the window and everything was very quiet. My stepfather, his name was Ray, had been married to my mother for 11 years before she passed. When she died, he and I had maintained a careful, cordial relationship. He came to my university graduation. I sent him a card at Christmas. We weren't close, but we were respectful. He was a decent man, I thought. Then my dad died, and Ray became a problem. My dad had been thorough. He was an accountant by trade. 32 years with a firm in Kelowna. Meticulous about everything. His will was clear. His estate included the house on Lakeshore Drive, 2 investment accounts totaling just under $800,000, a TFSA, and a rental property in West Kelowna that he'd owned outright since 2009. He left the house and the rental property to me. The investment accounts were split, 60% to me, 40% to my younger brother, who lives in Halifax now with his family. My dad had also quietly named me as executor. I didn't know this until the will was read. I was 29 years old, working as a registered nurse at Vancouver General, and suddenly I was responsible for managing my father's entire estate. I was terrified. But I was also organized, because my dad raised me to be organized, and I loved him enough to do it right. The problem wasn't the will. The problem was Ray. Ray had been helping my dad with some informal bookkeeping in the last year, just keeping track of bills while dad was too sick to manage things himself. My dad had trusted him. Ray lived nearby. He was family by marriage. And when my dad couldn't sit at a computer anymore, he'd asked Ray to help manage some automatic transfers and account access. Ray had a secondary access card for one account. It was supposed to be for emergencies. I discovered what he'd done 3 weeks after the funeral, when I sat down to do the formal accounting. The numbers didn't match. $46,000 had moved out of my dad's checking account in the 8 months before he died. Small amounts, 800 here, 1,200 there, sometimes 2,000. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a medical expense. It was a personal account that, after some digging, I traced back to a numbered company that Ray had registered in BC the previous spring. I sat in my dad's kitchen for a long time after I found that. I made tea. I drank it. I looked at the spreadsheet I'd built. I looked at it again. Then I did something that probably saved me a lot of heartache later. I didn't call Ray. I didn't call my brother. I didn't call anyone. I closed my laptop, drove back to my hotel, and I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia. She'd been recommended by a colleague, and the first thing she said after I explained the situation was, "Don't touch anything. Don't move any money. Don't tell him you know, and send me everything you have." So that's what I did. For the next 7 months, I kept up appearances. I sent Ray the occasional text about estate administration. I thanked him for bringing a casserole to the reception after the funeral. I was polite. I was measured. I gave no indication that anything was wrong. Meanwhile, Patricia and I built a case. It wasn't just the $46,000. Once we pulled the full records, Patricia worked with a forensic accountant named Dennis, who was deeply unpleasant to be around but extraordinarily good at his job. The picture got worse. There were charges on a secondary credit card linked to my father's name that Ray had opened, apparently with my dad's information, in the summer before his diagnosis. A hotel charge in Whistler. Restaurant charges. Retail. Gas. The card had been paid off automatically from my dad's checking account. My father, during his illness, had been managing his own decline and his own pain. He hadn't been watching his statements closely. He'd trusted the people around him. The total came to a little over $92,000. Now here is the part that made everything more complicated. Ray's sister, I'll call her the one with the tight smile, because that's honestly how I still think of her, had apparently decided that she knew what was going on and was going to get ahead of it. In the 5th month of my quiet investigation, I received a call from a lawyer I didn't recognize, informing me that a petition was being prepared to have me removed as executor on the grounds that I was, and I'm quoting directly from the letter that arrived 2 weeks later, emotionally compromised following a period of prolonged grief, exhibiting signs of financial mismanagement, and potentially lacking the competency required to fulfill the duties of a state executor. I read that letter 3 times. Emotionally compromised. I was a registered nurse. I had a clean credit history. I had a graduate certificate in health administration. I had a meticulously documented 7 months of forensic accounting sitting in a folder on my secure drive. I had, if anything, been suspiciously calm for someone whose father had just died. But I understood what was happening. Ray's sister had gotten to him first. They'd found themselves a lawyer, and they were going to try to paint me as unstable before I could paint him as a thief. I called Patricia the moment I finished reading. "They're filing?" she said. "Filing." There was a pause. Good, she said. We needed a venue. The hearing was set for a Thursday in October, at the Kelowna courthouse. It was a surrogate court matter. Estate disputes in BC go through surrogate. And the chambers were smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, a window that looked out onto a parking lot. The kind of room where serious things happen quietly. Ray arrived with his sister and their lawyer, a man in his early 50s who wore a very good suit and had the particular manner of someone who expected to win. His name was Mr. Wetherington, and he spent the first 20 minutes of the proceedings explaining, very smoothly, that I was a young woman in the grip of unresolved grief who had developed an adversarial fixation on my late father's trusted partner and was mismanaging the estate as a result. He had an affidavit from a physician, a Dr. Hartwell, who practiced out of a walk-in clinic in Vernon, stating that I had presented at his clinic, visibly distressed, and displaying signs consistent with impaired executive function and emotional dysregulation. I had never been to that clinic in my life. I had never met Dr. Hartwell. Patricia let him finish. She let the whole thing go into the record, every word. Then she stood up. Your Honor, she said, I'd like to begin with the affidavit from Dr. Hartwell. She requested the clinic records supporting the visit. There were none. She requested the intake form. There was none. She asked, directly, how the physician had assessed someone who, according to his own records, had never been registered as a patient at his clinic. Dr. Hartwell was not present in the courtroom. He had submitted his affidavit in writing. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was that his affidavit had been signed and dated on a day when I had been working a 12-hour shift at Vancouver General. Patricia had my employment records, signed by my charge nurse supervisor, confirming I had clocked in at 7 a.m. and clocked out at 7:18 p.m. I had been 4 hours away by plane. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain in a manner that conveyed zero tolerance for nonsense, removed those glasses and set them on the desk. She looked at Mr. Wetherington. Counsel, she said, are you aware that submitting a fabricated medical affidavit to this court constitutes fraud? The room got very quiet. Mr. Wetherington said something about being misled by his client. His voice had changed. Ray's sister stopped smiling. Patricia was already setting the second binder on the table. Dennis, the forensic accountant, had prepared a summary document that was genuinely a masterpiece of organization. 12 tabs, transaction records sorted by date, by account, by amount. A cross-reference of the numbered company registration against Ray's personal sin. 3 years of credit card statements. A timeline that made it impossible to look at and conclude anything other than what had actually happened. $92,417. That was the number. Patricia walked the judge through it methodically. She didn't rush. She didn't perform. She just laid it out, transaction by transaction, account by account, in the same quiet, careful way that my dad used to lay out a balance sheet. I sat very still and I looked at the window. Outside there was a mountain, one of the ones that surrounds Kelowna on all sides, brown at the base and white at the top. My dad used to point at them from the lakeshore and tell me their names when I was small. I can't remember all the names now. I wish I'd written them down. Ray's lawyer asked for recess. It was not granted. The judge ruled that the petition to remove me as executor was dismissed. She referred the matter of the fraudulent medical affidavit to the BC College of Physicians and Surgeons for review. She ordered a full accounting of Ray's access to my father's accounts and flagged the matter for referral to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. She also said, in the flat, measured tone of someone who has seen a great deal, Mr. Delacroix, I would strongly recommend retaining new legal counsel before your next appearance. That was the first time Ray's last name had been said out loud that day. He didn't look at me when we left the room. The RCMP investigation took 8 months. Dr. Hartwell surrendered his medical license during the college's review process. Patricia told me later that they'd found other irregularities in his practice, things that predated our case entirely. He was also charged with fraud over $5,000 in connection with the false affidavit. Ray entered a guilty plea to theft over $5,000 and fraud. He repaid $68,000 of what he owed through asset liquidation, his truck, some investments, and received a conditional sentence with restitution orders for the remainder. He will be paying that back for a long time. The rental property in West Kelowna sold in the spring. A young couple bought it, mid-30s, first home. I signed the paperwork at a coffee shop in Gastown and cried in my car afterward, which surprised me. I hadn't expected to cry about a house, but it was my dad's house. He'd bought it the year I started high school and he used to joke that it was his retirement plan. I'd heard that joke so many times. I kept the Lakeshore Drive property. I'm renting it for now. I'm not ready to sell, and I can't live in Kelowna. My life is in Vancouver, but I go back when I can. I sit on the deck that looks out at the lake. I bring coffee and I watch the way the light changes on the water in the morning. My dad was meticulous. He kept every record, filed every document, maintained every account with the same careful attention he gave to everything in his life. I used to tease him about it when I was younger. All those binders, all those folders, the accordion file he kept in the hall closet for receipts going back 15 years. I understand it now. I understand it completely. He taught me, without meaning to, exactly what I needed to know. The one thing I'll say, the thing I'd tell anyone who finds themselves in a situation like this, is that the hardest part wasn't the court. It wasn't the investigation. It wasn't even finding out what Ray had done. though that was its own particular kind of grief. To learn that someone your father trusted had been stealing from him while he was dying. The hardest part was the months in between. The texts I sent. The normal face I put on at Christmas when Ray sent a card and I replied thank you. The performance of not knowing, while knowing everything. Grief is strange enough on its own. Grief with a secret on top of it is something else. But I also think, and I've thought about this a lot, that my dad would have handled it exactly the same way. He would have been patient. He would have been thorough. He would have waited until he had everything he needed. And then he would have walked into that room and laid it all out, one document at a time. So that's what I did. For him, and because of him, and because the numbers always have to balance in the end.